Hello, Player One. Welcome to the Gaming History Club. My name is Gabby.
Hello, and I'm JP. We keep hearing the term Souls-like being used to describe many games, but what even is a Souls-like? Well, let's jump right in. Yeah, so Gabby, me and you, we kind of got into playing From Software games together mostly.
That's true.
I played Bloodborne before and a little bit of Dark Souls 3, I think, but really our journey into From Software started together, mostly with, Bloodborne again.
Bloodborne. Yeah.
Yeah, and Elden Ring and Shadow of the Erdtree.
Yeah. I remember how happy we were finishing Bloodborne.
Yeah.
That was like a great accomplishment somehow.
So it's truly unique to the From Software games. Like, if one game makes you feel like a sense of pride for completing it, it's 100% these games, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, to be fair, this episode is kind of questioning what even is a Souls like. I mean, we go on talking about From Software games before even laying the foundation. So,
All right, well, this is my favorite part of any episode. What is it?
definition?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
it's definition time. Well, a loose definition. So Wikipedia actually describes Souls-like as a subgenre of the action role-playing game genre. So they are known obviously for their high difficulty level, and we mean truly high difficult, right? And also an emphasis on environmental storytelling. I don't know if you can call it storytelling, because I mean, how cryptic can storytelling be and still be storytelling?
That's true. Right? They do storytelling more from like the environment, the item descriptions. It's so cryptic.
It
and-
is so
yeah.
cryptic. We'll find out later as well why it is so cryptic. And typically they are in the dark fantasy setting, mostly from Demon Souls, Dark Souls, Elden Ring. But like, I mean, they're not exclusively fantasy either. So we've got Bloodborne, for example, which is more like a gothic style, right? But like, mostly it is fantasy, it is super difficult, and there's environmental storytelling. So you might have also heard the term Souls-like being thrown around a lot when new games come out and being launched, and this happens a whole lot, and it reminds me a lot of like back in the late 2000s when a lot of things would be called like a GTA clone, and you go even further back before we were born, everything was a Pong clone. Yeah, but even they do that even when it's just very simple like RPG elements in a new game, or it's slightly more difficult than average, or just having like a parry system in the combat, that already gets like stamped like, oh, it's a Souls-like, it's a Souls-like, it's a Souls-like. So that's why defining it is not enough, because Souls-like is a combination of all of these characteristics, and it doesn't really do it justice to summarize it in just one sentence. So let's look into the characteristics of what actually makes a Souls-like game a Souls-like game.
True. Yeah. I think the first one, which is the most famous one, I would say, is the checkpoint system. Souls games always have that checkpoint system, whether you call it bonfire, grace, whatever it is. It's the point where you can replenish your health. You have the opportunity to level up, also fill up your health items. Another thing that will happen when you're on a checkpoint is that all of the enemies will be respawn. Not great or great at the same time, I guess. I mean, if you really want to like farm a little bit by killing like easy enemies, you need more experience points, then go ahead and do that. Go to the checkpoint and then be alive again. But I think the bad thing is, if you've already cleared the whole area, you didn't make it to the next checkpoint just yet, then that's not so great because you kind of lose your experience point at that time.
Well, that is when you go with strategy B and just rush towards the next bonfire and ignore all the enemies. That's something that I do a lot, isn't it, Gabby?
Yeah, that's very true.
You always tell me off for it, but it happens anyway.
I know, but you lost your XP a lot. I mean, your souls or your grace or whatever. You just like
I'm telling
lose
you,
it a lot.
it's part of the game. Every true
I know, it's true.
video gamer will tell you, like, listen, if you lose all your souls, even if it's like 500 gajillion souls, it's okay. It's part of the game, man. Just enjoy it. Just enjoy losing all your experience points.
Okay, well, fine. I guess the second characteristic now is crazy boss fights. Why do I actually call it crazy? You're just strolling into this area, fighting your regular enemies, and all of a sudden you hear this grandeur fighting music in the background, and you realize you're in trouble.
Yeah,
And
big
it's
big trouble.
big trouble. Out of nowhere, there's this massive dragon fall into you, or whatever it is. It's difficult. It's not easy. You're gonna spend days trying to beat this boss, which is normal in Souls-like games, which is insane, right? You spend days fighting this one, trying to find a pattern on how to even get a hit on a boss. But hey, when you finally figured it out after a week of trying, that would feel good too, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, the harder a challenge is, the more you're gonna get out of it after you accomplish the challenge. And the crazy boss fights, I think they do that like better than a lot of other games. Yeah,
Oh, 100%.
it is
Yeah.
so cool just to watch like usually like a cutscene first,
hmm
and it's like just this crazy boss. And the fights themselves, I think they're like so great to just watch people attempt
hmm
as well. Um,
It's like a sword dance in a way.
yeah, Mesmer's Flame.
Oh, yeah, you got stuck on that quite a bit, but that was a really cool one.
So yeah, what other defining characteristics do we have for Souls-like games? And again, just to repeat ourselves, yeah, like many of these elements are common to other like game genres as well. Even when it comes to like the gray sites and stuff, like that's just like a long rest or short rest maybe from like D&D days, you know. But like Souls have really like established this formula. So what else matters, right? Stamina. Stamina definitely matters. Your stamina level determines how many times you can attack, roll, block, parry. Basically, any action you can do back to back, your stamina is gonna go down bit by bit. And of course, what we already touched on is losing experience, which is also your currency. It's also your gold, right? So I gotta admit, this is what makes playing Souls like challenging and annoying at the same time, right? You've managed to brace through, then bumped into this super difficult arena, and you're dead. And the problem is, when you've had a lot of XP when you're dead, in Souls like games, it means that you have to travel back to where you were dead, and you have that one chance to retrieve your experience points. And a lot of the time, what's going to happen is that you've been like soldiering through, and then you're dead. The enemy just like managed to get that one lucky hit before you manage to get a health drink in. And then what happens? You are anxious, you are frustrated, you're disappointed in your skills as like a video game and just a human being. So you're gonna rush straight back to get your souls. And what's gonna happen? You're gonna trip and fall and die again. And then you're gonna be real upset.
Because all of your XP will be gone,
Yes.
basically. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, another characteristic is that you thought you were just, play Souls-like games to beat difficult enemies. But actually, there's a deep story that's super cryptic, as we mentioned before. I mean, I don't know if all Souls-like games are always that cryptic, because something more linear, like, Lies of P, for example, that story is easier to follow compared to, like, the From Software and Souls-like, or real Souls game from Software. But yeah, more about that later. The point is, if you play Demon Souls, Dark Souls, Elden Ring, and you manage to finish the game, you'd sometimes be like, wait, what was actually happening in the story? I thought I was just like having an adventure, but actually there was a story. It's not only the narrative that you have to pay attention to, as that doesn't really give away that much. It's from the boss design, the environment, and every single details build up that story inside the game.
We love a good storyline in a game, and we get like totally sucked into like characters talking.
Mm,
And you're like, oh man, this is like the voice acting is so amazing, and like the whole performance and the graphics, and it totally takes you away, but you still don't actually understand what's happening anyway, though. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
like in the full story
Like
of it.
you pay attention, but it just kind of like goes in one ear and leaves the other ear. It's like, what happened?
Yeah.
Like, what happened?
So, on to the next characteristic, right? It's the interconnected worlds with many secret passages. Souls like games are intricately designed with secret passages, unlocking shortcuts, where the world is just very big, but actually at the same time very interconnected to make it still fun for players. So lastly, last characteristic, right? Difficulty levels. What difficulty levels? There is no difficulty levels.
I
You
disagree. There is one super hard.
it's super hard. That's all. Like you can't really change this difficulty level. If you think Souls-like games too easy, good for you, I guess. If it's too difficult, well, you just gotta deal with it.
Well, some people can beat it like, with like a drumstick and like Guitar Hero
With
guitar and stuff
banana,
with banana.
yeah.
So I guess for those people, like the game has simply become too easy to beat. So. So where does the term Souls-like even come from, right? So the label Souls-like was born out of the groundbreaking design of Demon Souls back from 2009 and the Dark Souls series developed by From Software, led by Hidetaka Miyazaki, of course, and published by Sony. These games introduced a unique gameplay formula that became instantly iconic. The term Souls-like stems from one of the core mechanics in Demon Souls and Dark Souls 2. When you defeat enemies, you collect the souls, which act as both your currency and your experience points. And if you remember, we mentioned before, if you die in these games, you drop all the souls you're carrying. To reclaim them, you have to fight your way back to the spot where you died without dying again. And players found this high-stakes loop created a sense of tension and accomplishment very addictive. And yes, after a while, it is certainly addictive. I think at the start, you just kind of like, why is this so difficult?
Yeah, that's true. But you kind of don't want to give up because it just sucks you in, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the thing is like you need to really complete one of the games to really get it. But if you persevere and finish one of the games, you will get hooked. And then anytime a From Software game gets released, you're like excited and you want to play.
And to just prove a point how cryptic these stories are, let's talk about it a little bit. Let's talk the one that kicked it off, Demon Souls. The kingdom of Boletaria has been consumed by a dark force called the Deep Fog, unleashed after King Alland attempted to harness the power of a demon known as the Old One. The fog brings hordes of demons that feed on human souls, turning people into mindless monsters. You, as the player, are a lone hero tasked with slaying powerful demons, collecting their souls, and eventually lulling the Old One back into its slumber. This game introduced Dark Souls core themes, the inevitability of decay, the burden of choice, and cycles of light and dark. The NPCs you meet often have tragic fates, underscoring the futility of resisting fate.
Reminds me just of Majora's Mask if you think about it.
Yeah, a little bit, isn't it?
It's kind of like Legend of Zelda, but for adults.
Yeah, fair enough. Does that mean that Legend of Zelda is Souls-like?
Yeah. I mean, it came before though.
Yeah, it's the other way around, actually.
You could call it
Yeah.
a pre-Souls-like, a proto-Souls-like.
Small trivia, actually. Yes, Hidetaka Miyazaki did get inspired by Legend of Zelda.
Oh, okay.
So you kind of can see the correlation here as well.
I can see the correlation. So what you're saying is someone who's like world leading at like creating video games was inspired by the best video games in the world. Okay, that makes sense
Yeah,
to me.
that makes sense,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But yeah, let's dive into Demon Souls itself, right? The first game that started this Souls genre. So how did Demon Souls do? When Demon Souls launched in 2009, it was actually kind of a sleeper hit. Critics and players praised its unique blend of punishing difficulty, atmospheric world design, and innovative online features like, the player messages and invading other players' games. They found that pretty interesting.
Yeah, we hadn't even talked about that yet. That should probably be a bit of a defining characteristic of those games, to
Oh,
be fair.
yeah, that might be true. Okay, we
Yeah.
add one more then,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. We've just added one more, player one.
Yeah. However, its tough learning curve and lack of hand-holding definitely kind of polarized some gamers and critics at first. Not everyone liked this cryptic way of playing video games, right? Especially in Japan. Since the announcement in Famitsu in October 2008, and then the game being playable in Tokyo Game Show a week after, both the press and Sony staff didn't really give it the best review themselves, which is quite funny because they're the one who owned the game. I mean, imagine this, right? Even Sony president Shuhei Yoshida said when he playtested it, he spent 2 hours and couldn't get beyond the starting area. And he went on to call it an unbelievably bad game. And that's the Sony president at that time.
You know what the problem is? Like, it's brand new territory for everyone involved. You know what I mean? Like, no one can tell you yet, like, it's okay, keep at it. The start is the hardest. And
Yeah.
after a while, you're going to feel like, great. And don't worry, loads of other people have beaten this as well. And speedrunners will beat this guy in like 2 seconds flat. Like, no one's there to, like, just make you feel assured just
Yeah.
yet about this game. You just there struggling like everyone else. I kind of get it why it probably didn't receive the fanfare that it deserved just yet. But hey, it's a sleeper hit, so.
But yeah, it kind of is a different story in the West, though. So if in Japan it was kind of a sleeper hit, it's very different with the reality in the West. Particularly after Atlus localized it for North America. The word of mouth buzz about its challenging gameplay actually made it a hit among hardcore gamers. Sony, which published the game in Japan, didn't expect it to succeed, and they didn't want a sequel. But to be fair, it's about to be a good thing, because it opened up the door for Demon's Souls director Hidetaka Miyazaki and From Software to take the core concepts and reimagine them into a new spiritual successor, Dark Souls.
Yeah, so I promise we'll talk about Hidetaka Miyazaki in just a bit, but yes, fueled by Demon's Souls' growing popularity, From Software partnered with Bandai Namco to create Dark Souls. Without being tied to the Demon's Souls IP, Miyazaki and his team had the freedom to expand the game's ideas. This is some of the things that they did. They refined the gameplay, still keeping it difficult, but they improved the controls and mechanics to make it feel ever so slightly more fair. Bigger world, so Dark Souls introduced a larger and fully interconnected world, which was called Lordran, and instead of the segmented levels that they had previously in Demon Souls. And more story, with more resources, Miyazaki created a rich mythos around the Age of Fire and cycles of light and dark. And yes, harder. And when I say they kept it difficult, they really did keep it difficult. But again, because they updated the controls and mechanics, it certainly also felt a little bit more fair. So just the perfect thing of both worlds, actually. Make it harder, but make it fairer. So you even get more of the sense of accomplishment when you're actually beating the hell out of Dark Souls. No wonder that Dark Souls was only built on its predecessor, but became a massive critical and commercial success. It basically defined the Souls-like subgenre and turned From Software into one of the most respected developers in the industry.
Yeah, just to put it into perspective, right? Demon's Souls sold around 500,000 copies after 2 years of release. And Dark Souls, the first one, sold 2.3 million copies after 2 years of release. So that's a big difference in
Massive.
terms of popularity here. So also another not so surprising outcome is that fans asked for more and more Dark Souls. By this time though, Miyazaki was busy working on another game, so the game was directed by a different team, although Miyazaki is still involved to supervise on the work of Demon Souls 2. But in 2014, still, they released Dark Souls 2, and they were still very well received. Although fans thought it was just a little bit less magical and didn't feel as cohesive. The maps were more disjointed and less interconnected in general, which is quite ironic because actually here they added fast travel already to make it more accessible for new players. So yeah, that's just players feel how they want to feel, right? And just the fact that Miyazaki probably didn't get involved directly with the game made it a little bit less interesting. But yada yada yada, Dark Souls 2 was not as awesomely mind blowing as expected. So, where was actually Miyazaki during all this?
Well, he probably had the best excuse you could possibly have. Well, he was busy making Bloodborne instead.
Yes.
So, Bloodborne launched in March 2015 as a PS4 exclusive developed by From Software and, of course, directed by Hidetaka Miyazaki himself. Set in a dark, gothic world heavily inspired by Victorian horror and Lovecraftian themes, it stood apart from the medieval fantasy of the Dark Souls series while also retaining its signature DNA. Bloodborne introduced faster, more aggressive combat compared to the shield-heavy Dark Souls. Hear me out, here's some of the gameplay that made Bloodborne just more thrilling. There is no shield. You're more dependent on parrying and given faster dodging mechanics for evasion, which is definitely something that I'm a fan of. I really got into Bloodborne because I felt like not having a shield and like not having blocking. I'm just a dodger anyway.
Yeah, you're a dodger.
I just love
definitely.
dodging. It just makes me feel safe, okay? Even in Elden Ring, I'll be dodging all the time. Health regenerations, so this encouraged players to counterattack immediately after taking damage to regain health, fostering a risk-reward style of play, but also keeping the pace up a little bit rather than like, oh no, I've been hit. It's really important that I do not die. Okay, step away, shield up. Like it kind of breaks the game flow like this tiny bit if that happens all the time. Like if you're playing it too secure, Bloodborne would not allow you to do that. Like it keeps the anxiety up because like you don't want to get hit, gotta keep on dodging, baby. And of course mixed with like this counter-attacking to give you that extra health back, yeah, you're gonna think twice about just staying away now. And I always thought this was super cool, the trick weapons, of course. So each weapon had dual modes now, such as a sword that could transform into like a massive cleaver, and it allows for dynamic combat strategies as well, where you can like swap between modes as you're attacking, and it just made it like it filled the void, I think, from like not having shields. At least you get like this extra mechanic with your weapons too to kind of balance that out a bit. Yeah, it was really cool mechanic, right? So, what are the key differences between Bloodborne and Dark Souls? Well, firstly, the tone and setting. Where Dark Souls was more medieval fantasy with dragons, knights, and all that, Bloodborne was more gothic horror that's full of werewolves with eerie, nightmarish landscapes. Secondly, the combat style, as mentioned before, Dark Souls was a little bit slower and just heavier, reliant on shields, while Bloodborne, on the other hand, really wanted you to keep moving and attacking and shooting and dodging and parrying. Very active and fast paced. And lastly, the storytelling. Yes, both are very cryptic either way, but Bloodborne leans heavily into this Lovecraftian cosmic horror, exploring themes of forbidden knowledge and madness that's like hard to really describe in words. Lovecraftian cosmic horror.
Yeah,
You're not gonna nail it down better than that,
I
are
know,
you?
I know. So yeah, no wonder fans love Bloodborne. It is challenging, it's atmospheric, and they love the level designs because it's really different than the Dark Souls series. To also prove my point, remember how Dark Souls sold 2.3 millions in 2 years? Bloodborne sold 2 millions in their first year. It proved From Software could evolve from its formula and innovate beyond the Dark Souls series. The legacy of Bloodborne is definitely strong. It laid the groundwork for a faster combat system, which then later refined in games like Dark Souls 3 and Sekiro Shadows Die Twice.
Ah, don't talk about Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. It's so difficult.
It is difficult, but you already finished Bloodborne. So you should be able to finish Sekiro,
Ah, I
right?
don't know. It is very difficult. You know what? Once we're done recording, should we play some Sekiro?
Yeah, good
Sweet.
idea. Definitely, yeah.
So this innovation with Bloodborne birthed a legacy for the From Software's future games like Dark Souls 3. Now Miyazaki was back as the head of Dark Souls 3, which was a much welcome comeback. With Miyazaki's success on Bloodborne, he adapted a faster combat in Dark Souls 3, making the combination of the old Dark Souls formula just feel more refined, just both fast paced and also tactical. No wonder that when it was released in 2016, fans considered Dark Souls 3 to be the peak of the series, and that was very proven by the sales too. Let me remind you, Dark Souls 1 took 2 years to reach more than 2 million units sold, Bloodborne took 1 year to reach the same number, and Dark Souls 3 sold 3 million units on their first 2 months after launch. By 2020, 4 years after release, Dark Souls 3 sold more than 10 million units worldwide. Therefore, here goes the term Soulsborne was born. You see why I did that? Although I feel like the Souls-like and Soulsborne terms are always very confusing, but I want to let you know one that I agree with, which is mentioned by Redditor Puzzlebox. Nice name, Puzzlebox, by the way. Soulsborne is the way to say all those From Software games, and Souls-like is games that has Souls play characteristics.
Yeah, fair enough, right? So basically, Souls like is what you call it, Souls like. The
They're
one
like
that
the
like
Souls
that like
games,
the Souls game.
but they're not
Exactly.
born a Souls game.
And Soulsborne are just those games that we've mentioned before. But of course, right? From Software didn't stop there. In 2019, they released Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. Sekiro really diverged from the RPG elements of Soulsborne games, focusing on action and precision based combat. The lessons from Bloodborne's aggression and Dark Souls 3 polish were crucial in building this game. Sekiro introduced a unique setting, Sengoku era Japan, and mechanics, posture system, and grappling hook. It really set it apart while still retaining From Software's signature, like the difficulty and the world building of it. And of course, in 2022, From Software released their biggest boom yet again, which is Elden Ring, the winner of so many Game of the Year awards that even the DLC was nominated for Game of the Year in 2024. That's crazy.
It's no easy feat to nominate a DLC as the best game of the year.
I don't know how valid is that,
I
but
still feel parted about it.
yeah,
If
me
any,
too.
yeah, I mean, it should have definitely gone to the Horse Armor DLC anyway
Oh my god.
from Skyrim.
But to be fair, it was really good though. Shadow of the Earth Tree.
It was insanely good. It was insanely good. It could have been a sequel. Mind you, tiny bit of a short sequel, but still definitely a sequel.
It's still long, I would say.
Yeah,
Not as long as the base game, but you know, it's still a
but
big game.
almost like it's not far away from it at all, is it?
I know, yeah. But yeah, Elden Ring drew back from Dark Souls 3's mechanics and narrative structure while embracing Bloodborne's atmospheric innovation. It retained the interconnected world design seen in previous games, but expanded into an open world format, blending the best of all their past titles. And you actually get a torrent.
It's a donkey.
It's a torrent.
It's a unicorn without a horn.
It's a torrent.
It's a torrent. Yes.
Yeah, which is really cute, and I love that about Elden Ring.
Yeah, it breaks my heart a little bit when it dies for you in combat when you're riding it, but at least you can bring it back alive with the use of one flask, so that's okay.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so we've talked a bit about the From Software post-Souls titles, but let's step back a little bit to understand how FromSoft itself actually started. Who is this From Software developer that spawned all of these legendarily difficult games? From Software was founded in Tokyo in 1986, not as a video games company whatsoever, but as a software developer company that worked on productivity software, like Microsoft Excel. No, I'm just kidding. They didn't do Microsoft Excel.
No, they don't.
Well, it is difficult to be productive, so I guess I can see their love for challenges here. From Software's focus in video games didn't really start until the mid 90s when the PlayStation was just getting started and became a massive boom, together with the emergence of 3D gaming around this time as well. And that 3D gaming really sparked their interest to jump in on the industry as well. We can already see the DNA of all Sourceborne games when we look back into the very first game they made, Kingsfield. Kingsfield is a first-person action RPG and known for its atmospheric world, cryptic storytelling, and of course, challenging gameplay, all hallmarks of their later titles, apart from the first person, I would say.
True.
So what's the story about? The story is set in a medieval fantasy world and follows a young hero who ventures into a cursed land to retrieve a legendary sword called the Moonlight Sword. If that sword sounds familiar, by the way, it's because this sword became a recurring element in many of the From Software games. You also explore dungeons, solve puzzles, and fight monsters in this game. You know, your regular everyday today stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Explore dungeons, yes.
The first Kingsfield game has never been released outside of Japan, although the sequels did make it to Western audiences. Yes, the success of Kingsfield led From Software to release Kingsfield 2 in 95, Kingsfield 3 in 96, and Kingsfield 4 in 2001, or as it's also known, Kingsfield, the ancient city in the West. And I believe that's a little bit of trivia that many gamers might not be familiar with, that like they made games before Demon's Souls actually. While the series never achieved mainstream success, it did cultivate a cult following and help From Software establish itself in a niche for atmospheric, difficult RPGs.
Yeah, and to be fair, it's not like From Software was stuck with difficult action RPGs, because in 1997, when they were also still working on Kingsfield series, they also dipped into the mecha themes, which was very common and popular in Japan, by releasing a game called Armored Core. Even though Armored Core wasn't the first game to bring you giant robot fights, and certainly not the first one that allows you to customize your own robots, it brought the two concepts cohesively. The game grew popular, spawning many sequels as well. And in one of the sequels of Armored Core, here our main hero enters the story. Hidetaka Miyazaki, born in 1974 in Shizuoka, Japan. He wasn't really a gamer as a kid, instead, he was way more into Western fantasy novels that shaped his love for mysterious, open ended storytelling. For example, Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, choose your own adventure novels, Western folklore and mythology, you know, like cursed kingdoms, ancient gods, and stuff like that. Or, you know what, he also loved incomplete or mistranslated text somehow. Yes, so Miyazaki has said as a child he sometimes struggled with English language books or poorly translated versions of Western novels. But instead of giving up, he filled in the gaps with his own imagination, which really led into the cryptic storytelling style his games are known for.
It all makes sense now to me. Like, why is it so cryptic? He wants you to fill in some of the blanks yourself just because he enjoyed
Loved
that
doing
so
that.
much.
Yeah, he wanted to bring us, the players, into his world as well. So Miyazaki studied social science in Keio University in Japan. He didn't plan to work in the video games industry, and after graduation, he actually worked in account management for Oracle Corporations. But he always knew there must be something more.
Video games.
Best thing ever. But yeah, in his 20s, his friend introduced him to Ico, a minimalist action adventure released in 2001 by Team Ico. Ico's emotional storytelling and mysterious atmosphere left a profound impact. So by 2004, he looked for a game developer company that wanted to take on a 29-year-old who has never worked in games previously. And somehow by destiny, From Software answered Miyazaki's call.
I really need to get Miyazaki to help me make my CV and how to have a successful
Venture.
interview. Yeah. How did you make that happen, Miyazaki?
It's really impressive, right? But yeah, he was actually hired to work on the long running franchise at that point, Armored Core, as I mentioned before. So his contributions included Armored Core Lost Raven in 2005 and Armored Core 4, which was released in 2006, where he showcased his talent for creating intricate systems and immersive worlds. So, you know what? The talent is already there.
Yeah, and the game that later became Demon's Souls was already in the works when Miyazaki joined the project. The team behind the game was struggling and the game lacked a clear direction, so Miyazaki volunteered to take over as the director. And probably at this point, the management thought to themselves, well, the game was already a disaster. Why don't we let a new joiner play around with it? Go on then.
Yeah,
Under his leadership, Demon's Souls was transformed into a deeply challenging, atmospheric game with a unique approach to storytelling and multiplayer mechanics. He went on to work on Dark Souls 1, then supervised Dark Souls 2 whilst focusing on Bloodborne and back for Dark Souls 3, and then hit it with the big bang of Elden Ring, of course. But he didn't just solely work on Souls games either, though. He also returned to Armored Core with Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon in 2023, blending the lessons from Soulsborne into the mecha genre. And I believe Miyazaki's success is down to his deep belief in good storytelling and player experience, and I would 100% agree with him here. Storytelling? Miyazaki's games emphasize environmental storytelling and the cryptic lore, a style inspired by his childhood habit of reading incomplete translations of Western novels and filling in the gaps with his imagination. And of course, the player experience. He believes in creating games that respect the player's intelligence, offering challenges that are tough but fair and rewarding perseverance. Miyazaki always said that Elden Ring is very close to his ideal of a perfect game, but he said it's not quite there yet, and I honestly can't wait for what he's got in store for us next. So, how does Souls-like impact the gaming landscape? Well, firstly, it's the get good philosophy. Soulsborne games are synonymous with challenging gameplay. The phrase get good, which by the way isn't spelled correctly, became a meme but also a badge of honor for players overcoming seemingly insurmountable challenges. And let me tell you, this is something that only your friends will appreciate if they've also beaten a Souls-like game. If they haven't, they will just like roll their eyes and be kind of annoyed at you and will stop talking to you for a few days.
yeah, I can attest to that.
Yeah, just shut up, JP. We heard you've completed Bloodborne. That was like 2 years ago. This philosophy reflects broader cultural values of perseverance and skill mastery. And of course, Souls-like games redefine what you call difficult in games. Before Soulsborne games, games were fighting to be more and more accessible. And don't get me wrong, they still do until now. But the growing popularity of this difficult but rewarding mechanics really jump-started the concept that difficult games are okay to be made. we've always had difficult games, and a lot of games you could crank up the difficulty setting to the hardest level. But then again, it was trying to be accessible in different ways. So, for example, when you die, you will respawn like mere moments ago to where you did die. And there's just no shortcut to like beating a Souls-like game the hard way. Of course, there's the narrative innovations. So now we know that some gamers are absolutely okay with some cryptic storytelling, understanding the story by the slightest clue given in the environment, from item descriptions to really random NPCs dialogues. It's crazy. You are going to get away with a really bare bones story that can kind of be glued together if you are just crazy enough to connect the dots.
Yeah, actually, it's very cool how people are definitely okay with that now from playing From Software games.
I can't remember any other game where that was such a big deal, where the description of a weapon will actually tell you so much about the setting of the game world that would not be explained anywhere otherwise. And of course, the artistic influence, the haunting gothic and melancholic visual aesthetics of Bloodborne and Dark Souls influenced fantasy and horror game design, inspiring titles like Blasphemous and Salt and Sanctuary. Apparently, themes of despair, cycles, and rebirth resonate deeply with audiences.
I know, right? Who would have thought? The cool thing about this Soulsborne Souls-like games are actually the community that's built around these games. I mean, let's see like fan-made content, right? There are like lore hunters, such as YouTuber Fatifidia, whose contents are focusing on explaining the complex lore and narratives to make it more accessible and understandable by people. They really help explaining every single boss fights, for example, and why it's in that certain way. And also, another fan made content is like speedrunners with doing no hit challenge or playing Soulsborne games with bananas, as we mentioned before, or actually with mind control, like Perry Carial, who we've mentioned multiple times in our channel. Another cool fan made content is definitely mods. Fans want to expand on the story, the content, tweak the difficulty, or even remaking the entire game. Daughters of Ash, for example, is one of the most famous Dark Souls mod, which is a mod created by Grimrook that is a massive reimagining from the game Dark Souls. The mod adds many things like new bosses, items, and a new way to play the game. Another community related thing born around the Soulsborne Souls like games is cooperation. The series pioneered indirect multiplayer interactions like messages, bloodstains, and phantom summoning. These mechanics foster a sense of connection despite the solitary atmosphere when you play the game. And another more fun stuff, right? I know we talked about the get good philosophy or meme before, but honestly, think like praise the sun or you died memes really lightens the game's oppressive tone, right? Like you love seeing all of those memes. And another fun stuff which I know you would love, JP, is the fashion souls, where players obsess over aesthetics, over stats, basically. So you choose the best looking outfit for your character and the best looking armor just because you can.
Let me ask you a question. What is the point of becoming Elden Lord if you don't look really good doing it?
Well, if you're like in convert and you can't actually walk, that's not really good, is it?
I want to be in my awesome armor with my cape and my wizard hat and my staff.
And actually, that's a fair point. To be honest, all of them look really good anyway, other than if you mix match some silly ones, of course.
Yeah, that is a good point. There's rarely one that you feel looks a little bit silly. Which a lot of other games actually, there's always one that like really stands out. Like, oh, this one looks so cool. But no, like you get a really good mixture of different things that all make you feel pretty awesome walking around in
Yeah,
the From Software games. Yeah.
definitely, yeah. So, actually, what do we think about Souls like as a genre? Other than the games made by FromSoft themselves, we do have other Souls like genre like Neo by Team Ninja, which feels weirdly familiar, but at the same time, very distinctive still from Souls games. Or even a game that's very different in the mechanics, like the platformer Hollow Knight, that's probably more like Castlevania style than anything else, but some of the mechanics are definitely inspired by Souls games, and you can see that within the game. I don't really want to delve too much into these games, but because how big the term Souls-like is, I feel people might be a little bit overusing it. For example, because God of War allow you to parry and it has very well refined combat mechanics. Some people somehow call that Souls-like. I mean, no, it's not.
It's a lazy comparison. Come on, guys.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not. But yeah, as mentioned in the beginning, though, I think what makes a game to be called Souls-like has to incorporate the combination of those characteristics we mentioned before. But hey, they're actually all just words, and all words are made up anyway, so I guess make it as you want.
But that's why we like defining things right at the start of the episode, don't we?
Yeah, we try to. But yeah, at the end of the day, I feel like the most Souls-like games, other than Demon Souls or Dark Souls, are actually the games that come from Software themselves, like Sekiro, Bloodborne, and Elden Ring. But I guess we can just call those Soulsborne at the end of the day, right?
Right?
Right, right. They're all just words again. But yeah, but actually, one of our favorite that truly deserves the title might be Lies of P, correct?
Oh yeah, Lies of P, definitely my favorite Souls-like game by far. I think we both had so much fun. Me beating the game and you watching me beat the game because
Yeah, I didn't want to play Lies of P somehow.
yes, I don't blame you, but honestly, if you can beat one of these games, you can beat any game that you want.
Yeah, and I think Lies of P has very interesting storyline as well, how it's a lot clearer than any from Soft Games story, while still cryptic a little bit.
Like it has a more mainstream type of cryptic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, in the way of their telling the story. It's just amazing.
And the story itself was really cool too, not very often explored.
Well, reimagining the lore of Pinocchio is
Yes.
actually really smart in how they're doing it, so it feels familiar, yet cryptic at the same time. But yeah, what do you think the future of Souls-like or Soulsborne themselves?
Well, I'm super excited to see what happens with the newest game that will be developed. I know there's Elden Ring Night Rain coming out, but like I'm thinking the next kind of mainline game coming out. Super excited for it. Where else is it going to go? Because I have a feeling it's not going to be fantasy again. Because we've had Demons, Dark Souls, Elden Ring. Like who knows? Is it going to be fantasy again or not? Well, in June 2024, in an interview with The Guardian, Hidetaka Miyazaki discussed his approach to game development and the studio's future, actually. So, despite Elden Ring's massive success, selling over 25 million copies, Miyazaki maintains a cautious perspective. So he explains that he believes that not assuming future projects will replicate the success and allows the team the freedom to take creative risks and potentially fail, ultimately leading to better game design.
Yeah, don't be afraid of being innovative. I guess that's how Miyazaki wants his team to work, not assuming that this formula will always have to be replicated over and over and over again. But try around and fail. It's all right.
Yeah, Miyazaki addressed the challenging nature of his games too, so emphasizing that the difficulty is integral to the player experience again. He stated that if the goal were mass appeal, they could simply reduce the difficulty, but the intention is to create a sense of accomplishment through overcoming hardships.
Yeah, which we can definitely see in their games, right? And also with the release of Elden Ring's final expansion, Shadow of the Earth Tree, Miyazaki indicated that the studio does not plan to develop direct sequels for the game, preferring to create self-contained works. However, he's open to the idea of other creators exploring the lands between, basically, the world of Elden Ring in different media. I mean, we definitely look forward to Night Rain, right? The next Elden Ring stuff, which is the multiplayer one.
Yeah, I will just warn every listener listening currently, I'm absolutely useless. If you see Zesty Uncle joining you, then yeah, you better run.
Yeah, definitely. But Miyazaki also shared insights into his worldview, noting that he has always perceived the world as a harsh place. This perspective influences the challenging and often unforgiving environments in his games. Despite the demanding nature of game development, he expressed a deep seated passion in creating games, suggesting he may never stop making them.
Yeah, please do not, because we really enjoy playing your games. So, Player One, I hope listening to this podcast episode was not as difficult as playing Shadow of the Erdtree for you.
Yeah, but Player One, let us know which one's your favorite Soulsborne game. Do you think non-From Software Souls-like games are actually better than their own games? Well, let us know what you think by dropping us a message on our website, gaminghistory.club. New episodes of Gaming History Club are released every other Wednesday, so make sure you subscribe and follow us on our social media. We're on Instagram and Facebook as Gaming History Club.
Come back in a couple of weeks, Player One, when I don't even know what to say about the next episode. Just come back. I promise it's gonna be worth it. See ya.